Welcome, wherever you are, whatever you carry with you today. Now is the time to set it all aside. Close your eyes, or simply soften your gaze. Let your breath settle into a slower rhythm, and allow your thoughts to drift. Tonight, we'll walk slowly through a distant world, a world of boots on frostbitten ground, of long marches through snow-covered fields, of whispered hopes and worn-out uniforms beneath a sky heavy with silence. This is not the tale of generals and maps, not at first. No, we begin with the common soldier, the men who followed Napoleon Bonaparte through wind, through hunger, through the thunder of distant cannons, and into the cold arms of history. There is glory in the stories we often hear, triumphs and strategy, great speeches. But beneath those polished surfaces lies a very different rhythm, a rhythm of repetition, of discomfort, of a life shaped not by victory, but by survival. We begin, then, at ground level. Let yourself drift back in time to the crackling sound of firewood in the freezing dark, the rustle of stiff cloth and worn hands, the endless rhythm of marching feet. Imagine yourself now in the year 1810. You are a soldier in Napoleon's Grand Army. Imagine you are 18 years old. Perhaps your name is Etienne, or Jean-Marie, or something simpler, a name no one will remember in the history books. You come from a quiet village in rural France, a place of low hills, soft loamy earth, a wooden chapel with a rusted bell. Chickens pick at the dirt. Bread is made in communal ovens, and the days pass, slow and circular, as the seasons roll in, then out again. Then one spring morning, word reaches your village. The emperor needs more men. Another war, another campaign, another promise of glory. A man in uniform arrives with a small party, one drummer, one notary, and a soldier with medals on his chest. They post a notice, they read out names, and they wait. Some of the boys in the village step forward, eager, faces shining with a fire that only youth and stories can produce. They dream of uniforms, parades, gold, and maybe just maybe a bit of fame. But others are quiet, hesitant. Some names are chosen by lottery. You do not volunteer, but you are chosen. Your parents say little. Your mother bakes you hard biscuits. Your father places a hand on your shoulder once and then turns away. You pack your things. A small cloth bundle, a wooden spoon, a rosary, a bit of lard wrapped in cloth, a knife, and you begin to walk. The road to the training camp is long and dusty. You travel with a small group of boys and men your age, some from nearby towns. You don't know them well, but you will soon. The camp is not what you expected. It is not grand. It is not clean. Wooden barracks line muddy lanes. Smoke drifts from small, tired chimneys. You hear coughing before you see the men. You are now a conscript, a recruit, a cog in a machine. You are no longer Etienne. You are soldat. Training begins immediately. You wake before dawn to the sound of shouted orders. Not a trumpet, not a bell, just a voice dry, commanding, familiar with yelling. You rise from a straw mattress shared with lice and fleas. The wool blanket itches. Your breath fogs in the air. You stumble outside and line up. You are taught to march left right left again. You are taught to salute to shout, to lift your knees higher, to hold your musket straighter, to ignore the cramp in your side and the heat on your back. You drill in sun and in rain, in stiff leather shoes that blister and buckle. You eat from a tin bowl, mostly soup, sometimes with beans, sometimes not. Bread is hard, cheese is rare, wine is watered down and sour. At night, you sleep on the same straw. The itch doesn't go away, but you begin to change. Your posture straightens, your back toughens, the soreness becomes familiar. Like the ticking of a distant clock, the older soldiers call you Grognard, a nickname that means grumbler. They say it with affection, you think. Perhaps it is hard to tell. You start to understand that, in the army, complaining is not forbidden. It's expected. It's part of the rhythm. Everyone grumbles. About food, about boots, about orders, about everything. But they still obey. They always obey. A few weeks pass. You are issued your uniform, a blue coat, stiff with starch and dust, white trousers, a shako hat that is too tall and too tight, leather straps, a haversack, a belt, a canteen, a spoon, and a musket. It is long, heavy, nearly as tall as you are. You hold it awkwardly at first, then you grow into it. Your fingers learn its weight. Your shoulder learns the ache. You are now a soldier of Napoleon's Grand Army. You begin to hear stories of battles far away, of Egypt, of Austerlitz, of Spain. Some of the veterans were there. They speak in low voices, their eyes clouded with smoke and memory. They tell of marches longer than weeks, of frost, of thirst, of men sleeping standing up, leaning on each other like broken trees. They speak of the emperor, not with awe exactly, more like reverence born of fear. They say he knows the name of every regiment, that he rides alone into cannon smoke, that he barely eats or sleeps, but mostly, they say he wins, and so they follow. You listen, you nod, you try to imagine it, but it's hard. You're not thinking about Spain. You're thinking about the inside of your boot, about the scrape on your collarbone from a strap that doesn't sit right, about the ache in your jaw from clenching during drills. You write home once. You say, I am well, I am learning much, I sleep little, the food is enough, the men are loud but kind, we march soon. You don't mention the hunger. You don't mention the boy who ran away and was brought back, wrists bound, beaten silent. You don't mention the way you cry, sometimes, just for a moment, before you fall asleep. One night, there is a rumor. You're to be deployed. No one knows where. Orders are sealed, but the lieutenants are quieter than usual. The sergeant is already packing. You sit on a low bench, tying a leather strap. Around you, others do the same. The mood is still, not tense, not excited, just still. You hear someone humming, a tune from a village you've never seen. One of the boys offers you a piece of dried apple. You take it, say nothing. A part of you wants to run, but your legs don't move. You sleep that night with your boots on. Everyone does. And when morning comes, the barracks are already emptying. The sun rises, pale and dull, behind a curtain of fog. You hoist your pack. You fall in line, and you march, in time. The rhythm of boots on dirt will become your heartbeat. You will learn what hunger truly feels like, what distance really means, what silence hides in the eyes of the man beside you. But that is still ahead. For now, you are a soldier, and the road stretches on. The road is endless. That's the first thing you learn, truly learn, after you've been issued your pack and your orders. You think the war will be about battles, about decisive moments, about flags raised in smoke and songs sung at sunrise. But in truth, war is mostly walking. It is the quiet slap of boots on half-frozen soil, the sting of wind that never quite dies down, the groan of a pack strap cutting into your collarbone after 12 hours on your feet. And the mud, always the mud. You begin your first march just before dawn. The sky is a pale smudge of gray, and the earth is still cold from the night. There's no ceremony, no fanfare, just a word from the officer, and a ripple of movement that passes down the line like a shiver. And then you're walking. At first, it's easy. There's energy in your limbs. The early morning air carries a hint of spring-wet grass, distant smoke from village hearths, a songbird calling once and then vanishing. But the pack is heavy, the musket heavier still. Your feet begin to ache before the sun is even fully above the trees. You try to adjust the straps. You switch shoulders. You mumble a curse or two, and still, you walk. By midday, the rhythm has set in. The company moves in a line. It bends and weaves along the road like a river of cloth and metal. Some talk quietly, most don't. You hear coughing, the jangle of mess kits, the occasional grunt when someone stumbles on a loose stone. There's no music, no drums today, just the soft, dragging sound of 1,000 men in motion. You pass farms that have been emptied, villages with shutters closed, children peeking through cracks in doors, dogs that do not bark. At the side of the road, there's a broken cart. Its wheel snapped, half buried in mud. No one stops. No one speaks. By the time you reach the place where camp will be made, it's nearly dark. The day has passed in silence, in motion, in pain. The mud comes in many forms. In some places, it is loose and watery. Your boots sink with each step, making a soft sucking noise as you pull them free. In others, it is thick and heavy, clinging to your soles until your legs feel twice their weight. Sometimes, the mud dries and hardens in thick plates. You try to chip it off, but it returns the next day, layered deeper. There is no way to escape it. It's in your clothes, in your bedroll, in the creases of your hands. It cakes your musket stock. It dulls the edge of your bayonet. You wipe your face with the back of your hand and leave a smear behind. You no longer try to keep clean. You march through rain. It soaks your coat, then your shirt, then your skin. You cannot dry anything. Your socks are wet when you put them on in the morning, and wetter by nightfall. You march through snow. It blinds you, fills your boots with ice. Your breath clouds round your face and freezes in your scarf. The tips of your fingers sting, then burn, then go numb. You march through heat. The sun bears down with no shade for miles. Sweat runs down your back and into your boots. You drink too fast and ration too little. Men collapse, the column keeps moving. Sometimes, it feels like the weather is another general, one more enemy, one more thing you cannot fight, and yet, you adapt. Your legs stop aching, they simply go numb. Your shoulders become calloused where the straps rub. You learn how to tie your cloak just right to keep the worst of the rain off your back. You learn how to sleep sitting up, leaning on your pack, rocking with the rhythm of exhaustion. You learn to eat quickly, to drink when told, to move when ordered. You don't think about distance anymore, or destinations. You think in footsteps. In your mind, each day becomes a blur of motion, of road and dust, of sharp commands and cold mornings, of nights sleeping in a shallow trench dug with a tin spoon, of passing trees that all look the same, and always of the next step. Sometimes, things go wrong. A bridge collapses, a river rises and blocks your path, a horse dies in its harness, and the company must stop and lift the cart by hand. Once, you see a man sit down by the side of the road. Just sit. He removes his boots, looks at them for a long time. He never puts them back on. A sergeant comes, says something low. The man does not move. A few minutes later, 2 others lift him up, boots in hand, and walk him to the side. You never see him again. There is a strange kind of peace in the march. Your thoughts quiet. The world narrows. You stop wondering what day it is. Stop thinking about where you are. The past fades. The future becomes irrelevant. All that matters is movement. Boots. Ground. Breath. You learn to measure time by light. You know when the sun reaches its peak that it is halfway. You know by the length of your shadow how close night is. Sometimes, a crow calls from a distant tree. You wonder if it's the same crow as yesterday, or if they're all the same. Sometimes, you hum a tune. You don't remember where you learned it. Then, without warning, you are told to stop. Camp here. It may be a field, a patch of woods, a hilltop, a ditch. You lay down your gear, dig a trench if there's time, collect firewood if there is any left. You remove your boots, massage your toes, pull off your socks and examine the blisters. If it's dry, you air them. If not, you simply put them back on and brace for another day. Supper, if it comes, is thin, a stew made from hard bread and whatever meat was found or traded. You eat in silence, staring at the steam. You fall asleep with your knees still aching, your fingers wrapped around the strap of your pack like a child clutching a blanket. And before the next dawn, you march again. This is what war looks like, most of the time. Not glory, not banners, just boots in the mud, and men walking towards something they cannot see. The camp is not what you'd imagine. It is not a row of white tents fluttering neatly in the breeze. There are no flags waving proudly, no campfires surrounded by men laughing over cups of wine. Most nights, there are no tents at all. The Grand Army moves too fast, too often. Tents are luxury, bulk, weight. They are for officers, for generals, for others. You sleep in the open, sometimes under trees, sometimes beside low stone walls, sometimes in shallow pits dug by hand barely enough to hold your body and shield it from the wind. You arrive late in the evening, the sun already dipping behind the hills. The road falls away behind you. The column slows, orders are passed down, softly, warily. Set up camp, and so, you stop. You unstrap your pack, your shoulders sighing in relief. You stretch your arms stiff, sore, heavier than they were that morning, and you begin to settle. There is a rhythm to setting camp. It starts with the fire if there is wood. Someone is sent to gather it. Boots crunching through underbrush or slogging through fields, looking for anything dry enough to burn. Sometimes, it's damp roots. Sometimes fence posts. On desperate nights, it's dung. The fire, when it comes, is small. Just enough to boil water. Just enough to warm a hand or toast a crust of bread. The smoke is low, clinging to the ground. It seeps into your clothes, into your hair, into your breath. The air smells of many things. Burnt wool, damp earth, wet leather, the metallic tang of gunpowder, always faint, always present. And then there is the coughing. There is always coughing, low, chesty, persistent. Men hacking into handkerchiefs, into their sleeves, into the dark. The cold air bites at lungs already raw from dust and smoke. You hear the same pattern every night, short, sharp bursts of effort followed by silence, then another, then another. You grow used to it, like the creak of boots or the jingle of mess tins. It becomes part of the soundscape, a lullaby in reverse. You eat when you can. Sometimes there is stew, a thin broth, with cabbage or beans, shared from a single pot between 6 or 7 men. Other times, it's just bread, hard, dense, crumbling into your lap. You chew slowly, not from politeness, but because there's no second helping. You drink water if it's clean, or if it looks clean enough. Wine, when it's found, is passed around quickly, quietly, a single sip each, just enough to warm the chest and blur the edges of thought. There are no tables, no chairs. You eat with a spoon held in one hand, your musket never far from the other. You might talk, you and the men beside you, fellow grognards, though you've only known them a few weeks. You share small stories, where you were born, what your mother cooked in winter, what your sister's name is, whether she'll marry before you return. You don't talk about tomorrow. Tomorrow is another march, another chance to lose someone, another night of sore feet and shallow sleep. So you stay in the present. You laugh, sometimes, at nothing, at a joke told poorly, at a corporal whose snore is louder than cannon fire, at the absurdity of carrying a spoon like it's worth more than your rifle. It helps, a little. Eventually, you try to sleep. You lay out your blanket thin, damp, scratchy. You curl on your side, knees to chest, chin tucked in. You pull your coat tight and bury your face beneath the collar. But sleep is never easy. The ground is hard. Your back aches. Something's always digging into your ribs, a stone, a knot of roots, a forgotten cartridge. You shift, you sigh. Someone near you murmurs in their sleep. Another coughs. Somewhere in the distance, a horse lets out a snort. A guard's footstep crunches slowly by, and then silence, thick, unsettling, the kind of silence that presses on your ears, the kind that leaves room for thoughts. You remember your village, your bed, the smell of wood smoke from your father's fire, the taste of butter on warm bread. It feels far away. It might not even be real anymore. There are nights when it rains, the kind of rain that starts soft, then grows heavier. It seeps through the blanket, soaks your coat, drips into your collar and down your back. You don't move. What's the point? You just lie there, eyes open, listening to it fall. In the morning, you rise slowly. Your limbs protest. Your joints feel rusted. You pull on socks still wet from yesterday. Your boots resist. You force them on anyway. You don't speak. No one does. Breakfast is what's left from last night, cold bread. Maybe a few drops of wine. If you're lucky, hot water. If you're unlucky, nothing. You pack up what little you have, blanket, spoon, pack, musket, and wait until the order comes, and you march again. This is the camp, not a place of rest, but a pause in motion, a breath held between steps, a quiet space where nothing is truly quiet, and no one is ever fully asleep. There's something strange that happens, somewhere along the march, somewhere between the first blister and the 10th sleepless night, between the coughing in the dark and the muddy bread at dawn. You stop feeling like a solitary man. You become part of something, not a nation, not an army, a unit, a handful of men, comrades, not by choice, not by loyalty, but by something quieter, something born of shared hardship and silent understanding. It begins slowly. You start to learn their habits, who eats fast, who saves their bread for later, who always walks with a limp, who hums under their breath. You begin to recognize each other's coughs, each other's sighs. There is Luke, who always ties his bedroll the same way. There is René, who sharpens his bayonet every night, not because he needs to but because the rhythm comforts him. There is Baptiste, who speaks little, but carries a tiny wooden carving of a dog in his pocket, worn smooth with thumb and memory. You do not ask questions, but you notice, and in time, you come to rely on them. In camp, you share what little you have. If someone has an extra biscuit, it's broken into without a word. If someone finds dry wood, the fire is shared. A clean pair of socks becomes a treasure, a thread and needle, a miracle. And when laughter comes, it does. Sometimes it's not loud, not wild. It's soft, the kind of laugh that slips between sips of soup, that settles over the fire like smoke. It's never about much, but it is enough, enough to remind you that you are still human, still alive. There are moments that linger, like the time you held your pack over a stream so someone could cross on dry boots. Or when you helped carry a man too weak to walk, his arm over your shoulder, his breath hot and shallow against your neck. No one keeps score. There is no ledger for kindness here, just a shared promise that if you fall, someone might stop. And sometimes, someone does fall. The first death in a group is always quiet. It happens overnight. The man beside you, Paul, maybe, or Henry, simply doesn't wake up. You see his stillness before the sergeant does, his lips pale, his chest unmoving, his hand still curled around the strap of his pack. No one says much. A blanket is pulled up over his face. A small hole is dug, if there's time. If not, the body is left behind. There is no ceremony, just silence and walking. The second death feels different. It happens on the road. A man stumbles, gasps, collapses. Someone kneels beside him, tries to lift him. Another shouts for help. The column pauses for only a moment, just long enough. Then the order comes. Keep moving. And you do, because you have to, because the road waits for no one. You carry the weight of those who fall. Not their bodies, not usually, but something quieter. You remember their laugh, their handwriting, from that letter they never finished. The way they always saved a piece of their biscuit for later. They become ghosts, not of fear, but of presence. They walk beside you. In the way you shoulder your pack. In the tune you find yourself humming. In the empty space on your left where someone used to be. At night, their absence is sharper. You catch yourself turning to speak and find no one there. You reach to pass the bread, and there's no hand waiting. You feel the loss not in tears, but in repetition. In the small habits that now have no mirror. But still, you march, and new men join. Faces you don't know. Voices that haven't yet shared silence. They will, in time, because the road does that. It strips away the surface. It leaves only what endures. One day, you and Luke, your closest companion, now find yourselves crouched behind a stone wall, eating quietly. There is rain. It taps gently on your coat. Luke pulls a small scrap of paper from his pocket. Not a letter, just a drawing. A crude sketch of a house, a tree, and a woman holding a child. You don't ask who they are. He doesn't offer. You both just sit there, for a while, watching the rain drip from the edge of your hats. And in that stillness, there is something almost like peace. The bond between soldiers is not born of heroism. It is not built on speeches or medals or flags. It is made of spoons shared from the same pot, of boots lined up beside the fire, of a hand steadying your elbow as you climb the next hill. It is a brotherhood carved not in stone but in silence, sweat, and mud. You may forget the battles, but you will not forget the men, nor the empty places they leave behind. Obedience is a language you learn quickly. In Napoleon's army, orders are not suggestions. They are facts, fixed points in a shifting world. An officer speaks and the body moves. No discussion, no delay, and if you hesitate, the consequences are swift. You see it within the first week of marching. A man lingers too long at the edge of camp, searching for something, perhaps his spoon, perhaps his courage. The column is ready. The order is given. He does not move quickly enough. A sergeant pulls him aside. A short exchange, not loud. Then, punishment. Perhaps a few lashes from a leather strap. Perhaps extra duties. Perhaps something quieter. Shame, isolation. The unspoken disapproval of men who fear being slowed down. You understand, in that moment, that the army has no room for pauses. Discipline is survival, and discipline is fear. There are other rules. You must clean your musket, daily even if it hasn't been fired. You must answer roll call, even if you are sick, or limping, or half asleep. You must not fall behind, ever. Desertion is a crime punishable by death. You've seen the results. A small field, a row of men, rifles raised, a condemned man standing before them, blindfolded, back straight. The order is given, then silence, then the sharp, distant echo of obedience. And yet, as the days stretch into weeks, something begins to shift inside you, not defiance, but doubt. You begin to wonder, not aloud, never aloud, what all of this is for. You think about the emperor, Napoleon, le petit caporal. You've never seen him, perhaps you never will, but you know his silhouette, the hat, the coat, the stance. They say he rides at the front, that he eats what the men eat, that he cares for every soldier. But you wonder, does he know how many of his soldiers have no boots? Does he know how thin the soup has become? Does he know the names of the ones who do not rise in the morning? You were told this war was for glory, for France, for the future. But when you look around, you see only men walking through mud, whispering the names of lost brothers, folding damp letters, dreaming of bread. Is this what victory looks like? Still, you obey, because disobedience is too heavy, because doubt is not shared. It is carried alone, like a stone in the bottom of your pack. And because in the army, movement is easier than stillness. Obedience is a rhythm, a song without words. Left, right, left. Sometimes you overhear conversations, quiet voices around a fire. They say Spain is lost. They say we'll go to Russia next. They say he's gone mad. But no one says it loudly. No one says it twice. There are ears everywhere, and not all uniforms are the same shade of blue. Some listen, some report. So you speak of boots, of rations, of sore shoulders. You do not speak of belief. And yet, in private moments when the fire is low, when the sky is full of stars, when your feet are wrapped in rags and your coat is damp, you wonder, what will become of all this? What will be remembered? Will there be statues, songs, dates on a calendar? Will anyone remember the smell of a wet field? The way the cold crept into your bones? The silence after a friend stopped breathing? Will they remember the men who obeyed? Or only the man who gave the orders? Eventually, you stop asking. You keep your head down. You lace your boots. You lift your musket. You nod when spoken to. You sleep when you can. You march when told. Discipline has become a second skin. It chafes dotted scars, but it protects. It keeps you moving, long after belief has faded. And for now, that is enough. The year is 1812, and you are walking into something so large, so cold, and so quiet, it does not even need to resist you to destroy you. June. Early summer. The days are long. The trees are in full green. The sky opens wide like a mouth you cannot quite understand. You are standing on the edge of a river. Behind you, there is music, drums, a brass fanfare, men cheering. Wagons roll past on creaking wheels. Officers shout orders with polished boots and polished voices. Flags flutter in the breeze like colored birds that have lost their way. And ahead of you is the Niemen. The river is slow, broad, silent. Its banks are thick with reeds. The water reflects the sky so perfectly that for a moment, it feels like the whole world is upside down. This is the line, not just between Prussia and Russia, not just between countries, between expectation and reality. You're part of something enormous, over 600,000 men, they say, an army so vast it could walk from horizon to horizon without seeing its own end. Frenchmen, yes, but also Italians, Poles, Bavarians, Saxons, even Spaniards and Dutchmen. Languages blend together like the smell of smoke and sweat. The names are different, but the uniforms are similar. Blue, white, green, gold. They shimmer in the sun like river stones. There are horses, so many horses, tens of thousands. Some pulling cannons that look like dragons' ribs, others hitched to carts carrying sacks of grain, barrels of powder, crates of boots. There are women, too, camp followers, cooks, nurses, wives. Children cling to skirts or run behind wagons, chasing shadows. The column stretches for days, and you are one tiny part of it, a speck inside a tide. Napoleon has arrived. You catch only a glimpse, a dark coat, a bicorn hat, a horse that moves like it doesn't touch the ground. They say he stood on the hill at dawn and watched the mist lift from the river. They say he whispered, "From this moment begins a new history." No one questions it, not yet. The order is given. Cross the Niemen. No trumpets sound, no great speech, just the quiet rustle of movement. Boots splash into water, hooves churn mud, wheels sink, jerk, groan. You walk across the bridge if it still holds, or you ford, waist deep, arms raised, your pack balanced on your head. The river is cold, colder than it should be for June. It bites through your uniform, it makes you gasp, but you make it across. And you're in Russia, just like that. At first, it's beautiful, rolling fields, distant forests, wide skies, the air smells of pine, of grass, of distance. You march through meadows with butterflies dancing over tall flowers. You hear birds you do not know the names of. You see villages, sometimes wooden houses with steep roofs, chickens pecking in the dust, curious eyes watching from behind curtains. But the people vanish before you arrive. Doors are shut, windows boarded, wells emptied, food stores burned. The Russians are not meeting you on the battlefield. They are leaving ahead of you, burning as they go. You hear the phrase, scorched earth. It sounds like something distant, strategic, political. But what it means is that there's nothing left to eat. You carry hard biscuits in your pack, salt pork when you're lucky. You ration carefully. So does everyone else. Still, each day the bread gets smaller, the meat gets leaner, the water gets warmer, and the road gets longer. There is no fighting. That's what unnerves you most. You expected gunfire. You expected enemies. But there is only space. So much space. A landscape so large, it seems indifferent to your presence. Villages continue to appear and disappear. Smoke rising from rooftops before you arrive. Livestock gone. Grain fields turned to ash. Nothing to take. No one to fight. The officers insist this is a sign of weakness. That the enemy is afraid. That you will reach Moscow in a matter of weeks. But among the men, a quiet feeling begins to grow. You are chasing ghosts. Some die. Not from bullets, not yet. From heat. From waterborne illness. From exhaustion. From slipping under a wagon wheel on a muddy turn and not getting back up. Each day, the column is smaller, but it still stretches past the edge of sight. The size of the army becomes an illusion. Like a mirror reflecting a mirror, you begin to suspect that no one knows where the front is, or the rear, only that you are somewhere in between. You walk 12 hours a day. The sun is brutal. At noon, your uniform clings to your body. Your pack feels like stone. Sweat pools in the small of your back, drips from your chin, stings your eyes. The dust gets into everything. Your bread, your mouth, the fabric of your coat. When it rains, it is not gentle. It comes in sheets, soaking you in moments, filling your boots, turning the road to sludge. You fall, you get up, you keep walking. Your world shrinks. It is no longer about victory. It is about the next tree, the next mile, the next swallow of water. And still, there is no enemy, only distance, only silence, only the sound of your own breathing. At night, you dream, not of battle, not of medals, but of shade dot of a bed, of a spoon that is not bent, of a fire that burns all the way through the night. You stop writing letters. You no longer know what to say. One morning, you pass a village so small it doesn't have a name, just a handful of cabins, a broken fence, a single black goat tied to a post. The villagers have fled, but someone has written a message on the side of a barn. In coal, you will die here, but we will not kill you. You don't know who wrote it, but you believe them. This is how it begins, not with a gunshot, not with a charge, but with a long walk into a country that does not care whether you came to fight or to flee. Russia does not resist, it recedes, and in doing so it destroys. It is August now. You have been marching for more than 2 months. Time has become soft around the edges. Days no longer feel separate. Only the light changes. Long golden mornings turning into heavy evenings, each one indistinguishable from the last. Your feet no longer hurt the way they did. Now they burn. Then they go numb. Then they burn again. You stop counting blisters. You stop thinking about distance. You think only about the next pause, the next shadow of a tree, the next time someone says rest. And all the while the sky is changing. The clear blue of early summer is now a dull haze. There is smoke on the horizon. Constant. Low. Steady. Like a bruise spreading across the sky. You are approaching Smolensk, a city older than memory, wrapped in stone walls and myths. You have heard its name whispered for weeks. It has become a kind of promise. The first real stronghold, a prize, a symbol. The officers say the Russians will stand there. You will fight, and then you will win, and there will be supplies, rest, shelter, food. But when you arrive, the promise crumbles. Smolensk is already burning. The Russians had defended it, briefly. But they are gone now, retreated again, or dissolved into the smoke. It's hard to say. The city is not empty, but it is not whole. Walls are cracked. Buildings collapse under their own weight. Flames creep along rooftops like red vines. Ash floats through the air in soft, lazy spirals. The streets are littered with broken carts, shattered pottery, furniture tossed from windows. There are bodies, too, not in piles, just here and there, still, almost forgotten. You walk past them, with your sleeve over your mouth. You do not look for long. You cannot. Smolensk does not offer what you hoped. There is no shelter. The buildings that stand are black with soot and creaking in the wind. Doors hang off hinges. Chimneys leak smoke even when no fire burns inside. There is no food. The cellars are bare. The fields around the city have been stripped. The stores have either been carried away or destroyed. You find barrels filled with grain that has been soaked in lye, sacks of flour ruined with lamp oil, wells bricked up. You begin to understand, fully now, what scorched earth means. It does not just remove what is needed, it poisons what remains. The hunger begins slowly. At first, it is just a kind of tightness, an ache that you ignore, that you joke about, that you treat as a shared nuisance. You say, they call us the Grand Army, maybe one day we'll get a grand meal. But the ache grows sharper, and the jokes get quieter. You begin to ration more carefully. You save half your bread for the evening, then for the next day, then for as long as you can stand it. You chew slower. You drink more water to feel full. Some begin to trade, a bit of cheese for a dry sock, a coin for a handful of beans. But the coins begin to mean less, because you cannot eat metal, and metal will not warm you at night. Men begin to forage, in burned fields, in hollowed homes, in trash heaps. They boil bark, chew wild roots, eat grass when they find it fresh. Some dig up beets planted by the locals and left behind. Some are lucky, some become sick. You begin to watch what others eat. You listen for the sound of retching. You learn what to avoid. Berries with red skins, leaves that sting your tongue, mushrooms that smell too sweet. You learn because you must. The days grow colder, not suddenly, not sharply, but in quiet ways. The wind no longer feels refreshing. It feels pointed. The evenings come faster. The damp settles in your boots and no longer dries. You pull your coat tighter, and still, you sweat when you march, because hunger doesn't warm you. It tricks you. Your body is thinning. You feel it in the way your belt must be tightened each week, in the way your fingers seem longer. Bonnier. You stop looking at your reflection in puddles. It is no longer familiar. The army moves slower now. The wagons break more easily. The horses are dying, some from overwork, some from lack of feed. You pass them sometimes, fallen in the ditch, legs twisted, tongues lolling from dry mouths. You do not stop. You do not speak. The smell stays with you for hours. Napoleon still rides ahead. You do not see him, but you hear things. That he still eats meat. That his tent has wine. That he is angry, or calm, or indifferent. That he believes Moscow is close and victory closer. Some of the men believe it too. Others say nothing. You begin to realize that belief and silence look very much the same, and Smolensk fades behind you. The blackened walls vanish in the mist. The city is nothing now but another ruin on the road. You do not miss it. There was no comfort there. Only fire. Only ash. Only the beginning of hunger. You walk on. The fields stretch wide. Empty. The sky remains the color of soot. And you begin to feel something you do not name. It is not fear. It is not anger. It is the sense that you have stepped beyond a boundary. That the map you were following no longer matches the land beneath your feet. You begin to wonder not if you will win, but how far you will go before there is nothing left to lose. The name comes to you first as a whisper. Borodino, passed between officers, murmured at the edge of the fire, written at the top of crumpled orders. You do not know where it is, but you know what it means. A real battle. After months of marching, of empty villages, of smoke in the distance, the enemy is finally going to stand and fight. There is tension in the air, not panic, not excitement, just something taut and invisible, like a bowstring pulled back and held. Men speak less. They clean their weapons more. They tighten straps, check buckles. Ray wrap the cloth around their boots. No one is told what to expect. No one needs to be. You know. You can feel it in your breath. Something is coming. September 7th, 1812. The morning is gray. The world is still. You wake before the sun rises, in a field already damp with dew. A soft mist clings to the earth like a second skin. You eat quietly. Hard biscuit, a mouthful of water. You tie your pack, adjust your coat. The motions are the same as always, but they feel slower, heavier. There is no wind, no bird song, just the shifting of gear, the clearing of throats, the low creak of carts. And then, in the distance, thunder. Not from the sky, from the ground. Artillery. Borodino is not a grand plain or a great fortress. It is a gentle rise in the land, a few low ridges, scattered fields, and a meandering river. But it will become a graveyard by nightfall. You march toward the sound, through dust and early smoke, and then you stop. You are placed in formation, to deep, knees slightly bent, musket upright, breath steady. Officers ride back and forth in front of the line, issuing orders in clipped tones. No one responds. The sun is just beginning to lift over the horizon, but already it feels far away. You look around and realize, you can no longer tell how many of you there are, only that the field is full of uniforms. So many uniforms. Blue, green, red, and in every direction, silence, waiting to be broken. And then it begins. The cannon fire becomes constant. You don't see the enemy. You see smoke. You hear the boom. Then the scream of metal. Then the sudden, brutal stillness when a ball lands nearby. The earth shakes. You press forward, one slow step at a time. Smoke thickens in your throat. It tastes of sulfur and ash. Your hands sweat against the stock of your musket. You cannot see more than a few yards ahead. Everything is sound. The cries of men. The neighing of horses. The sudden thud of bodies falling. You do not remember raising your weapon. You do not remember firing it. But you know you did. You smell the black powder on your sleeves. You feel your shoulder ache from the recoil. You reload, slowly, carefully, as you were trained. Your fingers are shaking, but they still move. And then you do it again. The day stretches like tar. Time moves differently here. Minutes feel like hours, and hours like none at all. You do not know how many men you lose. You do not know how far you advance. You only know that the sun begins to fall behind a veil of smoke, and the noise begins to fade. Not all at once, but gradually, like a wave pulling back into the sea. until there is only coughing and moaning and the soft thump of boots stepping over things that should not be stepped over. They say we won, that the Russians retreated again, that Napoleon has claimed the field. You nod when they say this, but inside you feel nothing, because what you saw was not a victory. It was a machine, a grinding wheel of iron and fire and blood. No charge, no trumpet, just the slow, relentless collapse of noise and men. You sit down beside a tree that did not burn. You take off one boot. Your foot is swollen, the skin pale and cracked. You stare at it for a long time. You place the boot back on, because there is nowhere else to go. At night, the fires burn low, not celebratory, not defiant, just small, flickering signs that someone is still alive. You hear prayers. You hear silence. You hear the names of mothers and wives and children whispered into hands that are no longer steady. You hold your mess tin but forget to eat. You lie back on damp soil that smells of powder and sweat and something unspoken, and you close your eyes, not because you are tired, but because there is nothing left to see. In the morning, the battlefield is covered in fog and flies. Men walk carefully, stepping around what remains. Some bodies are collected, most are not. The earth is too hard, the work is too much. The air hums with stillness. No one speaks, because what would you say? Borodino is behind you now, but it follows you still, in the ringing in your ears, in the stain on your coat, in the part of your mind that no longer knows how to return to before. You walk again, because the order comes, because there is always another road, because silence is easier than asking why. Moscow, you have heard the name since childhood, the crown of the Russian world, the jewel beyond the steppe, a city of gold domes and old walls, a prize that would mean something. Anything. And now you are here. But it is not what you expected. It is not a city of welcome. It is not a city of triumph. It is not even a city of resistance. It is empty. You arrive in silence. The sky is low, the air brittle. No crowds line the roads. No white flags flutter from windows. No soldiers meet you at the gates. There is only smoke, not from cannon fire, but from rooftops, from doorways, from within the city itself. Fires lit from inside. The Russians have not just left. They have set their city alight. At first, you do not understand. You think the smoke is from your own columns, your own campfires. But then you see it thickening, curling upward from wooden eaves and tile roofs. Windows shatter from within. Timber crackles in strange rhythms. An orange glow pulses behind shutters and broken gates. You are not entering a city. You are walking into the hushed throat of a burning house Napoleon sets up in the Kremlin. That is what you hear. That the emperor himself has taken residence in the heart of Moscow, that stone fortress built centuries ago, that he walks its halls in silence, frowning at the charred skyline, that he waits for something, a letter, a surrender, a change in the wind, but nothing comes. The days stretch long and wide. There are no orders, there is no battle, there is only waiting. You walk through the streets, if they can still be called that. The buildings groan under smoke-stained weight. Churches stand hollow and dark, their bells silenced, their icons pulled from walls. You sleep inside whatever shelter you can find, sometimes a warehouse, sometimes the corner of a cathedral, curled beneath a cracked mosaic of some saint you don't know the name of. The silence is heavy. It is not peace, it is not relief, it is the silence of something abandoned, something deliberately emptied. You and the others try to fill the hours. Some wander, some scavenge, some steal. They find dresses and wear them for jokes. They sip melted snow from silver chalices. They sleep on feather beds in houses where the walls still hold heat. And still, it feels wrong. There is no joy in it, only the echo of someone else's life. Paused mid-sentence. The city smells of ash and damp cloth. You grow used to it, the same way you grew used to the smell of mud and unwashed uniforms. You grow used to everything, even the hunger. There is food here, some, but not enough. Not for everyone, and not for long. So you ration, you trade, you guard what you have and try not to look at the men who have less. At night, the fires still flicker, not from battle now, but from boredom, from the cold, from carelessness. The city never stops burning completely. It simply burns slower, like a candle someone forgot to blow out. Rumors begin to drift through camp, that the Russians have not surrendered, that Tsar Alexander refuses to write, that Napoleon is furious, or silent, or sick, that there will be more fighting, that winter is coming early. You hear them all. You believe none of them, or all of them. It doesn't matter. What matters is that nothing is happening, and that nothingness is heavier than war. You write home, but you do not know what to say. I am in Moscow. That is all. Everything else is smoke and stillness. You dream strange dreams. You walk through the city in your sleep, seeing it whole again. Shops full of bread, windows full of faces, candles flickering behind curtains. You wake up hungry, more tired than when you lay down. Some say the campaign is over, that this is the end, but you know better, because no one is cheering, no drums roll, no flags wave in celebration. There is only waiting, waiting for something to change, or something to break, and soon it will, but not in the way anyone expects, not with orders, not with trumpets, but with wind, with cold, with footsteps turning back the way they came. It begins with a whisper, not from the sky, not from the generals, but from the bones in your fingers, a sharpness in the morning air, a sting in your breath, a thin layer of frost on the inside of your coat collar when you wake. The fires burn lower now, the nights are longer, the wind speaks in a new voice, and still, no one says the word aloud. Winter, but everyone knows. Napoleon waits too long. That's what you'll say later, when it's all over, if you make it through, that he waited too long to leave. Too long to admit that the Russians would not surrender, that the campaign was already lost. But at the time, there is no speech, no grand turning point, no announcement that you are retreating, only new orders. Turn west, march back, and so you do. You are not the same men who came across the Niemen. You are thinner, quieter. You walk closer together, as if warmth could pass between coats. The wagons are lighter, not because they carry less, but because there are fewer mouths to feed. There is no triumph, no ceremony, just the sound of frozen earth beneath your boots, and the slow collapse of what was once an army. The snow begins lightly, a dusting, then a cover, then drifts. You wrap scarves around your face, but your cheeks still burn. You pull your coat tight, but the wind finds every seam. You learn the language of frostbite, the pale spots, the numb tingling, the sudden quiet pain that means tissue is dying. You do not speak of it. There is nothing to be done. Horses collapse in the snow. You pass them without turning your head. Wagons are abandoned. Cannon wheels freeze into the mud. You tear pages from books to stuff in your boots. You burn furniture for heat. You burn maps. You burn anything that will catch. And still, the cold deepens. Food is a memory. What little is left is fought over, guarded, hoarded. You eat frozen meat, boiled leather, a handful of grains someone scraped from a storehouse days ago. Some eat things you will not speak of. Some disappear into the trees and do not return. You do not ask where they went. You only keep walking. The road becomes a place of ghosts. They lie in ditches, along fences, under half shelters built of broken doors. They do not moan. They do not cry. They are simply still. Frost collects on their coats. Their faces turn pale, then blue, then bone. You learn not to look directly at them. You learn to keep your eyes on your feet. The Berezina River comes like a final test. A wide, black ribbon of ice and water, half frozen, half running, all deadly. The Russians are waiting on the far side, and behind you, they are chasing now. Cossacks on horseback, skirmishers. You wait for bridges to be built. You wait as men panic. You wait as wagons jam together. Horses rear, men shout, cry, fire muskets into the sky just to feel alive. And then you cross. Some on the bridges, some in the water. Some do not make it. The river does not care. It accepts all the same. After Berezina, the army is not an army. It is a trail, a thin line of men in rags, praying or cursing or silent. No formations, only the hope that something, anything, lies beyond the next hill. And finally, you reach the Niemen again, the same river you crossed in summer. Now frozen, you stare at it for a long time, not because it means salvation, but because it means an end, and behind you. But Russia does not leave you. Years later, you will still feel the cold, in your fingers, in your teeth, in the silence between conversations. You will not tell many stories. You will not speak of the snow, or the fire, or the names of those who did not return. You will say only that you marched with the Grand Army, and then you will be quiet, because what remains of Borodino, of Moscow, of the long white road is not victory. It is memory, and memory weighs more than a musket, and never fully thaws. Imagine waking on an island that has no horizon. You rise in the gray light of morning, draw open a curtain, or perhaps a shutter, and see the ocean in every direction. Not the calm, sparkling blue of postcards, but a rough, endless slate. Wine stirred, quiet in a way that doesn't comfort, but numbs. You are on St. Helena, and you are Napoleon Bonaparte. Or perhaps, watching the last years of his life unfold like a letter that no one ever opens. The year is 1815. Napoleon's 100-day return has failed. Waterloo is behind him now, and so are his armies, his marshals, his empire. He surrenders to the British, hoping perhaps for exile in England or even America. Instead, they send him here, to this rock in the South Atlantic, so far from France, so far from Europe, that it might as well be the moon. St. Helena is not large, roughly 10 miles long, 6 miles wide. It rises sharply from the sea, a crown of volcanic cliffs, ringed by crashing waves and shrouded in fog. There are no beaches here, no harbors worthy of the name, only jagged landings where boats struggle to dock in calm weather, and cannot dock at all when the sea grows angry. The vegetation is strange, scrub brush, ferns, clumps of bamboo in the ravines. The air is often thick with mist, even in midday. It smells of wet soil, salt, and old stone. It is a place that seems unfinished. Napoleon is housed at Longwood, a low, rectangular building on a windswept plateau, originally intended for the lieutenant governor, now repurposed for the most famous prisoner in Europe. The house is damp. Its timbers creak in the wind. The paint flakes from its shutters. The ceiling leaks. Still, it is dignified in its way, and Napoleon makes it more so. He brings with him a small retinue of loyal attendants, generals, secretaries, a cook, a valet, a few servants. They treat him still as emperor. They speak to him formally. They record his words. They dress him in uniform. He insists upon ritual, dictation in the mornings, chess in the evenings, readings from Caesar, Plutarch, Ossian. But the routines thin with time. The island presses inward. The distance from the world begins to settle into his bones. There is no true privacy here. British guards monitor the house at all hours. Visitors are limited. Correspondence is censored. Even the governor, Sir Hudson Lowe, treats him not as a man. And so Napoleon begins to shrink inward. His walks become shorter, his letters more sparse. He rereads the same books, tells the same stories, stares out the same window, watching the sea. By 1817, the first signs of illness appear. They are not sudden, only a slow exhaustion, fatigue after walking the garden path, a dull ache in his side, a pale tint to his skin, then nausea, intermittent fevers, a loss of appetite. At first, he shrugs them off. He has always been strong. He had survived wounds, winters, campaigns across deserts and plains. But the island is different. It does not attack, it surrounds. The doctor notes irregularities in his digestion. They try simple remedies, warm broth, rest, herbs. He does not improve. Some days he seems alert and conversational, debating Voltaire or Julius Caesar. Other days, he sleeps late, or not at all. He begins to write less. He eats less. His clothes hang more loosely on his frame, and the pain becomes constant, a slow twisting under the ribs. Outside, the wind continues. It whistles through the eaves, rustles the reeds near the path, pushes the fog in low swirls across the fields. Inside, time thickens. Days no longer feel distinct. The pages of the calendar blur. Morning and evening lose their meaning. He rereads the same passages of Virgil. He asks his valet what day it is, then forgets the answer. And yet, he is still Napoleon, even diminished, even ill. There is a kind of presence that remains. He corrects the grammar of his secretary's transcriptions. He arranges his books in a particular order. He receives guests with the air of a statesman, even if they are only naval officers passing through. But he does not go far from the house anymore. He no longer walks to the ridge. He no longer inspects the garden, and his gaze seems always pointed not at the island, but at something far beyond it, something invisible on the horizon. The ocean never answers. It only moves. It is the beginning of 1821. Napoleon has now spent over 5 years on St. Helena, and he is not well. Each morning comes slower. His sleep is shallow, uneven. He wakes in the dark, unsure of the hour, unsure of the day. He eats very little. The food repels him, even broth, even fruit. Some days, he cannot keep it down. There is pain beneath his ribs, a sharpness that grows dull, then returns again like a tide. He places his hand over it sometimes gently, as if it were a wound he could soothe simply by acknowledging it. He no longer walks the garden. He no longer sits by the window. Instead, he lies in bed most days, wrapped in blankets that smell faintly of old starch and lavender. The room is dim. He keeps the shutters half closed. Light bothers him now, so does sound. His voice, once so firm, so famously precise, has grown hoarse. His words slur. especially when the fever rises. He forgets what he was saying midway through a sentence, and so he speaks less, not from weakness, but from weariness. Dr. Francesco Antimarchi visits daily, a Corsican doctor sent by Napoleon's family. He brings laudanum, powders, hot compresses. None of it helps for long. He touches Napoleon's wrist, counts the slow rhythm of the pulse, places a hand on his forehead and frowns. He suspects something serious, perhaps cancer. He writes this in his notes, but he does not say it aloud, not yet. Napoleon is watched constantly now, by valets, by officers, by quiet shadows at the edge of the doorway. They do not ask questions. They follow routines, change the linens, adjust the pillows, pour water into a glass he will not drink. He thanks them softly. He is always polite, but you can tell he is elsewhere, already somewhere far beyond this room. On better days, he dictates fragments, memories of Italy, descriptions of the Egyptian sands, passages from the Code Civil, notes for a history of Caesar that will never be completed. On worse days, he sleeps, sometimes for 15 hours at a time, sometimes not at all. He stares at the ceiling, watching something only he can see. The spring rains come in April. The garden overflows with green, but he does not see it. His breathing grows shallow. He coughs at night, a thin sound that echoes through the wooden walls. Sometimes he groans, but mostly, he is silent. He lets the world close around him gently, as if it were a coat. On May 3rd, he loses consciousness for several hours. The room falls quiet. The attendants whisper. The doctor sits very still at the foot of the bed. Napoleon wakes, asks for water, then closes his eyes again. On the evening of May 4th, a priest visits. Father Vignali. He administers last rites, reads softly in Latin. The emperor does not respond, but his lips seem to move. His eyes remain closed. The next morning, May 5th, 1821, a storm begins. Rain pelts the windows. The wind howls across the hills, pulling at shutters, shaking the glass. It sounds like the sea trying to return to the land. Inside Longwood House, the candlelight flickers. A few men gather round the bed. The doctor, the priest, a few of his staff, Bertrand, Montholon, Marchand. Napoleon breathes slowly, then less, then no more. He is still. Someone closes his eyes. Someone removes the watch from his wrist. Someone steps outside into the storm to tell the governor that the prisoner is dead. They dress him carefully, in his green uniform of the chasseurs, a white waistcoat, a ribbon of the Legion of Honor. On his chest, they place the red silk sash of the Order of the Iron Crown. He looks peaceful, they say, or perhaps simply finished. The British insist he be buried on the island. His companions argue, ask to return his body to France. They are denied, so a grave is dug in the Geranium Valley, under the shade of willows, near a spring he once liked to visit. There is no name on the tombstone, only the date, because they cannot agree on what to write. Emperor, general, citizen, history, it seems, is not finished with him yet. As they lower the coffin into the ground, the wind begins to die, the storm passes, and a rare stillness settles across the island. Even the ocean seems to stop. The morning after the storm, Longwood House is quiet. Candles still burn in the room where Napoleon's body lies. The shutters remain closed. The air inside is heavy, with silence, with memory, with the scent of linen and wax. Outside, the earth is damp from rain. The birds return slowly, but inside, the stillness holds. And now, there is a task to be done. An autopsy, not just for medical clarity, but for history, for record, for the satisfaction, or the scrutiny, of Europe. Too many eyes have followed Napoleon's life. Now, even in death, they will follow this final examination. May 6, 1821, Longwood House. A group of men gather in the narrow room. Dr. Francesco Antimarchi, the Corsican physician who had treated Napoleon during his final illness, several British doctors, including Dr. Thomas Short and Dr. Archibald Arnott, two French military surgeons, a Royal Navy physician, 8 in total, observers, assistants, skeptics, all here to open a man whose body had once ridden at the head of nations. The process is slow, careful, methodical, respectful. There is no rushing, no whispered opinions, only quiet instruction, and the sound of steel on linen, of paper being unfolded, of pens scratching faintly against parchment. They begin with the abdomen. There, they find the stomach swollen, discolored, the internal walls thickened, the lining inflamed. Near the pylorus, the lower end, there is a lesion, a large one, ulcerated. Angled, misshapen. It bleeds slightly when touched. Though Napoleon had not eaten for days, the tissue round it is pale, a strange pallor. The doctor's note, almost white. The medical term is lardaceous, waxy, smooth, unnatural. They examine the liver, large, yellow. The spleen, congested. The lungs a little cloudy. The heart is removed and preserved separately, placed in a sealed vessel. Napoleon had once said he wished it to be sent to his wife, Marie-Louise. No one is sure whether this request will be honored. The consensus, by the end of the day, is this: Napoleon died of stomach cancer. The lesion in his stomach is extensive, its edges ragged, its position consistent with fatal ulcers. Dr. Antimarchi, though hesitant, agrees with the others. The report is signed, filed, dispatched to London and Paris. The cause of death is listed as chronic ulceration of the stomach and cancerous disease, and, with that, the matter seems settled. But not everyone is satisfied. Even among those present that day, there are private doubts. Why was the lining so white? Why was there no sign of typical internal bleeding? Why had some symptoms been inconsistent, with no weight loss at first, no emaciation, no vomited blood? Why did the stomach's appearance resemble not just cancer, but chemical injury? For now, these questions remain unspoken, or whispered only at night, in letters, in memoirs written years later. But a seed has been planted, that perhaps the autopsy told only part of the story, that perhaps the most famous prisoner in the world had not simply died, but had been helped along. Outside, the grave is closed. No headstone, no epitaph, just soil, and a name carried only in memory. But inside Longwood, and across Europe, a quiet murmur begins to grow. What if it wasn't cancer? What if someone wanted him gone, completely? And what if they succeeded? It began with a lock of hair, clipped gently from Napoleon's head on the day after his death, not by a doctor or a scientist, but by one of his attendants. A keepsake, a relic, a piece of the man preserved in silence. It was stored in a drawer, then in a box, passed from hand to hand, from family to collector, from memory to museum, and for nearly a century, it meant nothing more than what it was, a piece of history, until someone decided to test it. The year is 1961. Technology has changed. Chemistry has advanced. The past, it seems, is no longer out of reach. A team of researchers, curious and careful, subject Napoleon's hair to forensic analysis. They are not looking for much, but what they find surprises them. Arsenic, not a trace, not a whisper, but in high quantities, far above what would be considered natural, consistent not with accidental exposure, but with poisoning. The news spreads quickly. The idea is shocking, enticing, and oddly satisfying. Napoleon, the man who defied Europe, who crowned himself emperor, who escaped exile once before, did not simply fade into illness on a distant island. He was silenced, eliminated, assassinated, slowly, carefully, in a place with no guns, no blades, killed by the smallest of hands. Arsenic is a quiet poison. It has no taste, no smell, no color. In small doses, it mimics illness, stomach pain, vomiting, fatigue, weight loss, just like cancer, but it works differently. Cell by cell, system by system, it weakens the body, fogs the mind, disorients the senses, and if delivered over time, in food, in drink, or even in the air, it can pass unnoticed, until it is too late. If Napoleon was poisoned, then the questions multiply. Who and why? Some suggest the British, that they feared a second escape, a second rise, that they did not trust even the ocean to keep him contained, that they preferred a quiet end over a second war. Others point to the Bourbons, the restored monarchy in France, who saw him as a symbol that could not be allowed to linger, a ghost too powerful to ignore. Still others whisper about Longwood itself. Could it have been someone close? One of his attendants, bribed or bitter, a hand that served him wine in the evening, or brewed his morning tea. Nothing is proven. No letter, no confession, no trail, just silence and a trace of arsenic. But there is another possibility, one less dramatic, one less deliberate. Wallpaper. In the early 2000s, scientists studying the walls of Longwood House made a discovery. The green pigment used in its elegant, floral wallpaper, popular at the time, contained copper arsenite, a compound known today as toxic, deadly in warm, damp environments, prone to releasing arsenic vapor when exposed to mold. The room where Napoleon slept had such wallpaper. The island was often humid. The air inside was rarely circulated. Could the arsenic have come from the walls? Could the emperor have slowly inhaled poison each night, not from an enemy, but from decor? There is no final answer, only evidence, an interpretation, and the strange unease that comes from not knowing. The lock of hair still exists, stored in temperature-controlled archives, tested, retested, still showing high arsenic levels. But science cannot say what the source was, only that the element was there, in his body, in his breath, in the cells that failed him. And so the theory remains: arsenic, the murder without a weapon, a death without a wound, a silence written into the walls themselves. The grave on St. Helena remained untouched for nearly 2 decades. No name, no title, just a patch of earth beneath the willows, where the ocean wind never quite stopped. Visitors left stones, letters, whispers. Some believed he had died forgotten, others believed he had never died at all, that he had escaped again, disguised, vanished, living out his final days in some distant land, that Napoleon was not a man anymore, but a myth. In 1840, the French king, Louis Philippe, made a gesture. He ordered Napoleon's body returned to France. A grand exhumation, a stately voyage, a reburial fit for an emperor. The British agreed, and so the grave was opened. Witnesses gathered. In the valley, officials, soldiers, doctors, they peeled back the layers of soil, unsealed the coffins for nested boxes of tin, lead, and mahogany. And inside the body, surprisingly intact, clothed still in uniform, medal still on his chest, his face strangely preserved. Some said he looked asleep, others said he looked like a wax figure. No one agreed on what it meant, but the effect was powerful. As if time had not dared to claim him fully, he was reburied beneath the golden dome of Les Invalides in Paris, a sarcophagus of red quartzite, carved with his name, surrounded by statues, banners, and inscriptions. Visitors came by the thousands. Some stood silently, others wept, and still, in quiet corners, the whispers continued. Did he die of cancer? Was it murder? Does it matter? Modern historians lean toward a natural death. Stomach cancer, they say, fits the pattern. Napoleon's father died of the same illness. The symptoms match. The autopsy, though primitive by today's standards, was consistent. Even the traces of arsenic can be explained. Environmental exposure was common in the early 19th century. Arsenic was in medicines, dyes, paper, paint, in the air itself. There may have been no poisoner. No plot, only illness, isolation, and time. But the mystery endures, because mystery is more than uncertainty. It is comfort. A soft veil drawn over history's sharp edges. If Napoleon was poisoned, it means his enemies still feared him, even in exile. If he died of cancer, it means even the mighty fall to the ordinary. If he escaped, somehow, and died in peace under another name, it means the story never truly ended. Each version gives us something: a sense of justice, a cautionary tale, a myth to carry forward. We choose what to believe, not always because it is true, but because it makes the silence feel less empty. In the end, Napoleon became more than a general, more than an emperor. He became a question, an idea carried through fog, through stone, through time. And perhaps that is the fate he would have chosen: not peace, not victory, but memory, the kind that does not fade, even when the light has gone. Imagine stepping into a room lit only by candlelight. The air is warm, faintly scented with orange blossom and tobacco. Polished wood floors creak beneath silk slippers. A crystal chandelier casts soft sparks across the ceiling, each one dancing in rhythm with the firelight. Every object gleams slightly: porcelain teacups, silver trays, the surface of a walnut piano. And the voices don't shout, they float, soft phrases spoken in careful French, measured and musical. A laugh, light as lace, a name murmured behind a folding fan. This is not a royal court, it is not a battlefield, but power moves here, in soft ripples. You are in a salon, and the empire is listening. During Napoleon's reign, the salons of Paris were not merely gatherings, they were institutions, spaces of exchange, of subtle persuasion, of performance, both intellectual and social. They did not take place in palaces, but in the grand drawing rooms of private apartments, often on the second floor, the piano noble, with tall windows overlooking cobbled streets. The salons were neither official nor underground. They hovered in a liminal space, somewhere between the personal and the political. At the center of each salon was a woman, not always noble, not always young, but always influential. She was the hostess, the mediator, the curator of voices. It was she who decided who entered and who stayed, who was seated where, what music would be played, whether the conversation turned toward philosophy, poetry, or the emperor's latest decree. These women, Madame de Staël, Madame Recamier, Madame de Genlis, held no titles of state, and yet, ministers sought their approval. Poets recited in their parlors. Generals bowed as they entered. Their weapons were not sabers or proclamations. They wielded wit, charm, and silence. The rooms themselves were an extension of their power. High ceilings framed by plaster molding, velvet drapes drawn half-closed against the chill, carpets woven with imperial lilies, a harp in the corner, a writing desk with a folded fan beside an open letter. Tea was poured, not hastily, but ceremonially. Sugar cubes cracked gently with silver tongs. The cups were fine porcelain from Savers, hand-painted with gold rims. And the conversation? It glided. No one interrupted. No one barked. Even disagreement arrived like a feather on silk. A visitor might find themselves seated beside a painter, or a statesman, or a scientist describing the motion of planets, using lemon peels and a spoon. The men spoke carefully. The women listened, and often replied with more insight than expected. The topics drifted, from Roman law to romantic poetry, from the tension between reason and emotion, to whether the empire's glory could ever match that of Greece, all under the quiet supervision of the hostess, who guided it like a conductor shapes an orchestra. But these salons were not naive gatherings. They knew the world outside. They knew that Paris pulsed with soldiers' boots and police reports, that war raged in Spain and in the snows of Russia, that power shifted hourly, and listening walls were never far away. Still, they gathered, they dressed, they arrived by carriage, they removed their gloves slowly. They stepped into candlelight with the composure of seasoned performers, because in this room, for a few hours, language mattered, ideas breathed, and the empire vast, loud, and male, could be shaped by voices soft and subtle. The salon was not a revolution, nor a throne, but it was a stage, and on that stage, women led, not by command, but by invitation. Her name was Juliet, but in Paris, during the Empire, few dared to say it so plainly. To most, she was simply Madame Recamier, a figure of impossible elegance, seated at the center of every room without ever appearing to try. She did not shout. She did not preach. She did not oppose the emperor with banners or with speeches. And yet, her very presence was a kind of quiet resistance. She was not born a duchess, not born into power. She rose instead through grace. Not the grace of beauty alone, though portraits suggest she was beautiful, but the grace of gentleness, of stillness, of refusing to hurry in a world that demanded speed. She moved slowly through rooms, filled with men who had conquered continents, and they listened. Her salon, on the Rue du Mont Blanc, was like no other. You did not enter loudly. You arrived as if stepping into a dream. The lights were always low, shades drawn just enough to dim the gas lamps outside. She preferred candles, real flame, not the hiss of new invention. The air was perfumed faintly with violets. Harpsichord music drifted from the far end of the room, never too loud. The footmen wore pale livery, and the walls were lined with books, not mirrors. It was not opulence that defined the space. It was softness, silk cushions, whispered laughter, thoughts shared with the care of poetry. There, Juliet welcomed artists, philosophers, and generals, but also opposers of Napoleon's rule. She did so quietly, never declared, but known. François-René de Chateaubriand was among her closest friends, a writer and diplomat, and a man of strong royalist leanings. He sat often near the fireplace, reading aloud passages of his melancholic prose, words about lost honor, about ancient glory, about longing for peace in a time of iron. And Juliet listened, always attentively, always, without comment, and yet everyone knew what she meant. Napoleon did not care for Madame Recamier. He disliked her independence, her refusal to flatter, her unwillingness to reshape her salon to suit his image. At one point, she was even exiled from Paris, her influence seen as dangerous. Despite her silence, she returned years later, undiminished. The exile only strengthened the myth. Her power was subtle, never written, never spoken outright. But men changed their minds after her evenings. They reread Rousseau. They questioned the empire's grandeur. They considered, again, the value of moderation, of civility, of memory, all under the influence of a woman who served tea slowly, who wore white muslin gowns without ornament, and who once said, "There is nothing stronger than gentleness." Her rebellion was not in action. It was in stillness, not in opposition, but in example. She showed that to resist the world's harshness, one did not need to be harsh, only constant, only calm. The salon was never loud, and perhaps that's why it lasted. In its softness, there was strength, a different kind of empire, one built not on territory, but on thought. The room is quiet now, Candles flicker low in their sconces. The fire crackles softly, not a roar, just a low rhythm of warmth. Outside, the street has stilled. No hooves, no voices, only the occasional creak of a carriage wheel turning far in the distance. Inside, words are moving, not quickly, not forcefully, but with care, passed from one person to another like a fragile porcelain cup. These are the conversations that moved the empire. And they began not in parliament, not in war rooms, but here in salons lit by candlelight. Someone speaks of justice, not the kind enforced by soldiers, but the idea, the thing behind the laws. A man quotes Rousseau, another responds with Montesquieu, and then a woman, calmly, almost as if reciting a recipe introduces a new idea. What if freedom is not the absence of authority, but the presence of understanding? A pause follows. No one rushes to answer. That is the etiquette. Each thought must be allowed to settle, like tea leaves in warm water. Elsewhere in the room, a pair of artists debate antiquity. One favors the clean geometry of classical sculpture, order, harmony, proportion. The other is drawn to the darker tones of romantic painting, emotion, shadow, ruin. Their disagreement is not heated. It moves gently, like a waltz, each point met with a nod, a smile, a counterpoint softly spoken. A musician, seated nearby, quietly begins to improvise on the harp. The notes hover, half in air, half in memory. The hostess does not lead the conversation. She guides it, with a glance, with the quiet introduction of a new voice, or a subtle change of topic when tempers stir. And so the current flows again, now to politics, but in abstraction. They do not name Napoleon. That would be too direct. Instead, they speak of leadership, of Caesar, of Lycurgus, of the dangers of charisma without restraint. Someone opens a volume of Kant. Another refers to a letter from Thomas Jefferson, a letter sent from across the sea. Read aloud in halting French, the ideas leap borders. Even here, in this room of silk and books, the world is present, not as maps or armies, but as questions. What is liberty? What is progress? Can an empire be enlightened? They do not agree. They are not meant to. The point is not the conclusion, but the process. Outside, snow begins to fall, or perhaps rain. The world fades to a hush. Inside, a poet recites a passage from Ossian, the melancholy bard beloved by Napoleon himself. The words are quiet, mournful, dreamlike, and for a moment, everyone simply listens, not to argue, not to respond, but to feel. These evenings leave no records. No laws were passed, no borders redrawn, and yet the empire was moved, not by force, not by decree, but by reflection, and by the memory of minds that met, gently, brilliantly, beneath the slow flutter of candlelight. The salon is warm, the tea has been poured, the fire murmurs in the grate. Outside, the city sleeps, or pretends to, but inside these high-ceilinged rooms, beneath painted plaster and quiet laughter, someone is listening, not to admire, not to reflect, but to remember, to report, to turn whispered thoughts into weapons. It is 1810. Paris is at the height of Napoleon's empire. Victory after victory. Titles handed out like invitations. A continent redrawn by decree. But beneath the glory, there is fear, not loud, not panicked. Just the quiet hum of caution, like a note held too long in the background of a song. Napoleon does not trust salons. He understands their beauty, and their danger. These are not military councils or official assemblies. They do not vote or march, but they speak, and in speaking, they shape the mood of a city. A thought, repeated softly over tea, can carry farther than a cannon, and so, he watches them, or rather his minister of police does, Joseph Fouch, a man more shadow than flesh. He sends men and women into these rooms, some in uniform, some in gloves and lace. Some say nothing at all. They simply sit and listen. You may not know who they are. You may never suspect the quiet man by the bookcase, or the woman who laughs a little too often. But later that night, in a private room, a report is written. A guest said something unwise. A name was mentioned. A poem too political was recited aloud. It is noted, filed, and sometimes remembered. Saloniers know this. The hostesses, Madame de Staël, Madame Recamier, they know there are ears behind the curtains, so they craft their evenings carefully. No direct criticism, only suggestion. No names, only allusions. They speak of Caesar, not Napoleon. They say the throne, not the emperor. But even these veils grow thin, and some salons are closed. Others are watched more closely, and a few disappear altogether. Still, there is another layer, because not all spies are unwelcome. Some are friends, some are even hosts. Information flows both ways, from the regime into the salons, and from the salons back into the government. A guest might leave with more than gossip. He might carry a message, or a warning, or an idea, polished in conversation, ready to be planted elsewhere. Not all secrets wear cloaks. Sometimes they wear silk waistcoats, or pearl hairpins, or a perfectly still expression during a very particular silence. And not every betrayal is malicious. Some are survival, some are politics, some are simply curiosity. A question asked over teacups. So what do you think of the emperor's new education law? The answer, measured, cautious, or bold, may travel farther than the person who spoke it. Because in the salon, speech is a performance, and every performance has its audience. The music ends. Guests gather their gloves. The fire dims. No arrests are made tonight. No charges filed. But someone is already writing. Somewhere near the Palais Royal, a quill scratches softly in a dim-lit room. The empire listens, even when it sleeps. The year is 1813. Napoleon's empire is beginning to crumble. The roads of Europe are no longer lined with victory banners. Instead, they are littered with mud, frost, and retreat. The Grande Army, once unstoppable, is scattered, its uniforms tattered, its drums silent. But here, in Paris, the salons still glow. Candles are lit. Music plays softly. Gloved hands lift teacups with careful poise. The war has come closer, but not yet inside. And so, the evenings continue. You would notice the change if you returned. The rooms are quieter. The conversation slower. There is less laughter, and more looking over shoulders. The women wear darker colors. The men speak more in metaphor. The harp is played gently. Yes, but now only old melodies. Sad, floating things from before the wars. It is not defeat that hangs in the air. It is memory. They speak now of loss, though not directly. A ruined chapel in Dresden. A cousin fallen in the snows of Smolensk. A letter from a brother who has not written back. But they speak of these things as if in a dream, with the hush of people who know how fragile the moment is. No one says failure. No one says end. Instead, uncertain times, a turning of fortunes, a long winter ahead. Madame Recamier hosts fewer evenings. Madame de Stael is in exile. Many old guests have vanished, to the countryside, to mourning, to caution. And those who remain, they speak more carefully. Ideas are still exchanged. Poems are still read. But the fire that once warmed the room now flickers behind a screen. Every phrase is a risk. Every truth wears velvet gloves. The empire is cracking, not with thunder, but with sighs. And in the salons, you can feel it. The soft way a conversation trails off. The empty chair by the window. The way someone glances at the door before answering a question. It is the sound of endings, of pages being turned slowly, not to rush the close. In March 1814, Paris is invaded. Napoleon abdicates weeks later. The empire ends, not with a roar, but with paper, ink, and resignation. And in the salons, the candles are extinguished. The tea service is stored. The velvet cushions fade. Some salons are shuttered permanently. Others wait, quiet, empty, for a new age to reopen them. But none will be quite the same. Still, the memory lingers. The scent of perfume in the wood panels. The feel of silk on polished armrests. The low echo of music in the tapestries. And the words, those careful, daring, whispered words, still seem to hang in the air. Long after the guests have gone. They shaped nothing. Some would say, they changed nothing. But in those shadows of empire, beneath chandeliers and folded fans, another kind of power lived, soft, brilliant, ephemeral. The salons were not built to last. They were built to shimmer, to speak, to fade, beautifully. You've walked through the mud and silence of the battlefield, stood among frostbitten soldiers and desperate men, sat beside the emperor as his breath grew shallow, and wandered through the soft-lit parlors of the Parisian elite. From the bottom of worn-out boots to the top of feathered bonnets, Napoleon's world was one of contrast, of ambition and decay, of relentless motion and moments of stillness. In many ways, it was a world not unlike our own, shaped by routine, by hunger, by voices raised and silenced. And, just like today, it was lived not by history's great names alone but by the countless quiet lives that surrounded them, the soldier, the servant, the singer, the scribe. And now, as the candles fade and the wind settles outside your own window, you can let it all drift away. History has walked its long road, and you can finally rest.